Think about it. Nobody taught them how to throw a ball, how to shave, how to stand up for themselves, or even just how to feel safe in the world. And yet somehow they figured it all out.
So that's what we're talking about today. We're diving into the lives of people who grew up without a father and how that absence shaped every single part of who they became.
You know, there's this particular kind of pain that comes from growing up without a father. It's not a loud pain, it's a quiet pain. It's that ache you feel at a school sports day, looking into the stands and seeing it seems like every other kid has someone there cheering just for them. It's that spotlight of absence you feel at a wedding, the second the father-daughter dance begins. And sometimes, decades later, you could be 35, and just an ordinary moment can trigger that exact same childhood ache, and you still don't fully understand why.
Well, psychologists actually have a name for this. It's called ambiguous loss. It's grief for something you never fully had. And what makes it so incredibly complicated is that society doesn't always give you permission to grieve it, right? If your father died, people get it, they understand. But if he just left, or was never there to begin with, the world often expects you to just move on, as if the absence of someone who was supposed to be there doesn't count as a real, legitimate loss.
It's that feeling of being on the outside, just looking in.
A tradition that just shines a light on what never was.
And it's a grief that honestly has no expiration date. And this impact, it goes way beyond just feelings. We're talking about science here. Research actually shows that growing up without a father has measurable effects on brain development. Children without fathers often show higher levels of cortisol, that's the stress hormone, from a very young age. Basically, their nervous systems learn a tough lesson, and they learn it early, that the world isn't fully safe, that support can just disappear, that people leave.
And this creates what psychologists call an insecure attachment style. These kids grow up and often go one of two ways. They either cling to relationships, absolutely terrified of abandonment, or they do the exact opposite and push people away before they can get left again. But here's the thing. Both of these responses, they come from the very same wound. It's this deep-seated belief that love is temporary, that the people who are supposed to stay eventually go.
Now, for boys without fathers, the impact can be particularly visible. I mean, they often lack a model for what healthy masculinity even looks like. So they might overcorrect, becoming emotionally closed off and hyper-independent. Or they spend their lives searching for those father figures in other places, in bosses, mentors, older friends, and even their partners.
So all these early experiences, they end up forging these really specific and often kind of paradoxical patterns that follow them right into adulthood. First off, they become fiercely independent, not because they want to be, but because they learned really early on that depending on someone is, well, it's dangerous. Asking for help feels weak. Accepting support feels uncomfortable. So they build these walls, you see, but it's not to keep people out, it's to protect themselves from the pain of being let down again.
They also often struggle with authority. It doesn't matter if a father was absent, abusive, or just emotionally unavailable. So many adults who grew up fatherless find themselves really uncomfortable around authority figures. We're talking bosses, male teachers, older men in positions of power. There's this unresolved relationship there that plays out in professional settings, often in ways they don't even recognize themselves.
But here's that paradox I mentioned. There's a real strength here too. They often love harder than most. And this is something people can really miss about them. Because they know exactly what it feels like to be left, they can become the most devoted partners and the most present parents. They break cycles. They show up. They stay. They become the father or the stable presence they never had.
And get this, they also tend to achieve more than anyone expects. It's true. So many of the most successful people in the world grew up without fathers. And it's not in spite of the absence. In some ways, it's because of it. They learned self-reliance. They learned resilience. They learned that if something was going to happen in their life, they were going to have to be the one to make it happen. And that drive, a drive born from pain, that often becomes their greatest strength.
But even after years of therapy, success, healthy relationships, and a lot of self-awareness, people who grew up without fathers will often describe a wound that just never fully closes. It gets smaller, sure, it hurts less often, but then there are those moments, a graduation, a wedding, the birth of a child, where the absence feels just as fresh as it ever did.
And you know what? That's okay. Grief doesn't have an expiration date. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It just means learning to carry the weight differently.
So if there is one thing you take away from all of this, let it be this. The absence of your father is not a reflection of your worth. Children don't get abandoned because they aren't enough.
They get abandoned because their parents were not ready, not capable, or not willing. That is not your story to carry. That is theirs.
So if you grew up without a father and you are still standing, still trying, still showing up for the people in your life, you should know something. What you've built inside yourself, the strength, the empathy, the resilience, nobody gave that to you. You built it yourself, from nothing.